on the 20th of May, a live wire fell on the roof of a train near Stratfield Station, creating an outage around train works involving that stop. For those who don't know, Stratfield is the center point of the train network system, which means all the major train lines except the T4 line were affected, along with some of the greater Sydney lines. What really matters is that the major train lines were down, and it was nearly 5 o'clock. Everyone is going to finish work soon and await this disaster.
Sydney's rail network is a nightmare as we go to air tonight. Commuters told to find another way home.
Brought to an almost complete standstill during the afternoon peak.
It's going to be a 4 or 5 hour trip to get home again. What can you do?
This happened during my second day at my new job. That normally takes an hour and a half to get home, which fucking sucks. But that's my fault choosing a place far from home. I stared at my blank screen at the train station and wondered how the fuck am I gonna get home now? There's no way I'm gonna catch an Uber. They're just capitalizing on this strategy and charging extra for their services. Sounds stupid going to work just to pay for the Uber trip home. By looking at Google Maps, I saw the bus trip was only 2 hours long. Okay, not too bad. It's only 30 minutes longer. However, I will have to catch 4 buses. I swiftly ran to the closest bus stop and saw my bus on the horizon. But as it passed by, I saw the bus completely sandwiched by people inside, making the driver refuse to take any more passengers, along with the other buses that drove past my stop. So that was an hour wasted trying to wait for a bus as they were going from the city, making it constantly filled with people. So I decided to go to the city instead, as the metro system there was still active and it could push me further away from the city. When I arrived, the city was worse than I imagined. The bus stop that hosted the bus I needed to catch had a crowd that could fill up an entire concert. There's no way I'll be able to catch a city bus, so I head inside the central station, which was filled with people running around and staring at the blank train screens, wondering on how to get home. So I went to the metro, which was obviously filled with people, since it's the only thing in the city that was running, and despite it not leading anywhere close to home, it brought me far enough away from the chaos. After the metro, I had to catch 2 buses home. I was lucky to catch the first bus since it was too full to hold any more passengers and had to decline a bunch of people from my stop, but at the cost of becoming that person trapped inside that sandwich. The second bus was late, as expected from Sydney buses, but at least it wasn't full. I got home at 9 PM, 4 hours after my shift was completed. Afterwards, I had a shower, I ate, and then slept. The little free time I had after work was wasted dealing with public transport, although the website at the time said it would fix the outage by 6:30 AM tomorrow, which was pretty naive thinking that was the case. It seemed fine in the morning as I caught the train to work like normal, but then it stopped at some random station and then kicked everyone off because it turns out that the outage was still not fixed. The trains were still fucked and I was going to be late trying to navigate the unreliable bus system on my 3rd day of work. 2 hours late to be exact. Not a good impression as the new guy. The trains were still fucked after my shift, but I immediately went to the bus stop this time. I was gonna make sure I can get home in 2 hours so I can maximize my free time, even if I have to take 4 buses home. Well, it took me 3 hours instead, from a shit time to a less of a shit time. Even when I followed Google Maps perfectly, I was still an hour late because I have to remind myself how terrible catching the buses in Sydney are. The buses get stuck in peak traffic, along with it stopping every minute since the stops were literally so close to each other to the point where you can see them from each other. The buses are constantly behind on schedule, and because of this, you can't rely on the timetable shown. They just appear randomly at your stop half the time. Fortunately, the outage was fixed at the end of the day, but the 2 days of chaos is going to be the event that symbolizes how much of a joke Sydney public transport is. Following this, the Premier made the following Monday free travel day to compensate for the events that transpired. Quick editor's update. Firstly, free travel day only refers to the trains and metro. You still have to pay for the buses, even though bus commuters still got fucked over by how crowded they were. And during the day, a mental health incident happened at Artarmon, a station that only has 2 train lines running through it, but despite this, it still affected other train lines and created delays across the network. Of course, the trains had to fuck up during free travel day. Like, I'm surprised that it can be continued continuously disappointed in the Sydney transport system. Additionally, the metro system went down the day after. It's just a constant domino effect here. The free travel day does sound good on paper, but even if you ignore the incident that happened on that day, the compensation still doesn't mean shit, because how public transport fares work is that there is a cap for every week, which is $50 for adults, and fares are calculated by distance and peak hours. The further you travel, the more you pay. And when you travel during peak hours, then you have to pay around 43% more. So for me, I have to catch a bus and train to work, which adds up to $8 to work and $8 back, totaling to $16 every day. So even with the free travel day, I still reach the peak on Friday. Although I do live far, so most people would spend less than my daily commute, but they are gonna still hit the peak or becoming close to hitting it if they decide to go out for the weekend. It's so expensive traveling here, and it doesn't help when they recently increased it last year, as well as removing benefits. It baffles me that they can just increase it, because the previous pricing was still really expensive. And it also doesn't help the struggling cost of living here in one of the most expensive cities in the world. To compare to other Australian cities with adult fares, Canberra is only $3.22 flat. Distance doesn't matter, and your next trip is free when you tap on an hour prior of tapping off. I remember when I lived in Canberra, I complained a lot about the pricing, but now it doesn't look so bad after living in Sydney. The Melbourne system is actually more expensive by having a $55 weekly cap, although there are much more benefits in Sydney that can prevent you from hitting the cap every week. Additionally, fare evading is so common over there from what I heard online and from asking people that live in Melbourne, so I guess it's free, but this was probably not a good example. And then there's Queensland, which is an interesting case because the fare is 50 cents everywhere. That costs like nothing, and due to that, it encourages more people to travel by public transport. The justification of Sydney being expensive is that it's a more advanced system due to the size of the city. We got buses, trains that travel within and out of Sydney, light rails, ferries, and the underground metro system. I do have to praise the variety of transport systems and places it can go, along with how efficient it can be with certain locations, but that praise can only exist when it functions. Two words Sydney-siders hate to hear: track work. Turns out an incredibly old railway system needs constant maintenance to avoid derailing it and any other disasters. Fair enough. So track work often happens every weekend. This changes the train's schedules and routes, or even just removing the routes and rendering some stations unavailable. It's always a coincidence that every time you want to go out for the weekend, there's track work preventing you from getting to your location efficiently. It's frequent enough that I've been fucked over by it plenty of times already, and it doesn't feel right when I have to learn a new timetable and route every time I go out for the weekend. I shouldn't be acting like it's my first week in Sydney when I've already lived here for months. There's also train strikes, which are about the Sydney Train and Rail Union protesting higher pay for their workers. And by protesting it, it means that the trains are less frequent, to the point where you're just better off assuming that they aren't active for the duration of the protests. The experience you get during a strike is pretty much the same as my story during the outage. It's a debate if the union is justified to strike in the first place. Either the government's underpaying them for the essential service, or if the union is greedy for asking for more money. It doesn't matter what side you're on, because by using trains around Sydney, you become a pawn for the union to be used for their cause, by fucking you over and thousands of other people around Sydney just to pressure the government to give them more money, when all you want to do is just go to and from work. Like, why do I have to be involved with all of this drama? We are forced to rely on this necessary service and the unreliability of public transport, but are required to pay a high price for it. I never felt so frustrated with a singular thing in my life because of all of this. But as for me and plenty of other people in Sydney, we are bound hostage to use the system every time we go out, no matter how inconvenient or how much the service fucks us over constantly. Also, by the way, I wrote most of the script while catching the 4 buses home during the fucking 3rd day of the trains being down. That's right, there was another day, because 2 days after they fixed the outage, the trains went out of service again on Friday due to flooding. I pay $50 a week to deal with this shit. Oh my fucking god, I hate the city so much.